Some warframes are so good, they're deemed overpowered. Some warframes are strong and versatile and loved by many. Some warframes are seen as lackluster, underpowered, and are often overlooked and neglected. And some warframes are Hydroid. Hello YouTube, I am the Console Casual, and today we'll be looking at arguably the least popular warframe in game, Hydroid. Hydroid is a water and pirate themed warframe, and all of his abilities are based around crowd control. He has long been a black sheep of the warframe community, and on the receiving end of quite a few jokes and pokes. To find out why, let's start off by taking a look at his abilities. Now I'll be talking a little in depth about all of these, because there's something that I think you'll notice. Starting us off is Tempest Barrage. This ability marks a 10-meter area, not affected by mods, for an aerial artillery strike. The resulting shots have minimal damage, but will knock down enemies in a fairly wide range. Now this, luckily, is affected by range mods. However, the pattern of firing shots is random, and the area they strike is random, and furthermore there's also a few seconds of delay between casting and the shots actually being fired. It also completely glitches out at times, especially aiming through doorways. All this means that Tempest Barrage may be dodged by a few lucky enemies. Hydroid's tidal surge turns him into a moving wall of water. Any enemies in its path get knocked down and dragged along with him. Usually. Now it's true that this ability costs double the energy of other mobility powers like Rhino's Charge and Excalibur's Slash Dash, but then again none of them have the range of this thing. With max range you will be a 30-meter wide wave of water, sweeping away almost every enemy in your way. For me, Tidal Surge is probably Hydroid's best survivability tool, because he's immune to damage while using it, and it allows for quick escapes from hairy situations. With Undertow, Hydroid turns himself into your chosen flavor of jam. I prefer strawberry. Now this puddle is totally invisible to enemies, so they'll wander into it and start drowning, taking a whopping 25 damage. Now this is finisher damage, and it can be increased with mods up to 87ish. But in a game where enemies will typically have thousands and thousands of health, this isn't much of a benefit. Now damage aside, Undertow allows you to continue actions like reloading, regaining shields and health while in the pool, and when deactivating it, all the enemies will re-emerge, knocked down on their backsides. Most of the time. This ability is probably the most lackluster of Hydroids available for. While it is fun to watch enemies randomly sink into your puddle, there's really not much else you can do with it. You can't move around, your teammates can't dispatch the enemies inside, and you only have a very brief window after you end the ability where the enemies are vulnerable. This ability is reminiscent of an older time in Warframe, where abilities were far more simple. Sometimes just a jump. I did find a very enjoyable synergy with this and the Jacket Tag's exploding Vulcan Blitz, which is actually quite useful and satisfying. But overall it's just underwhelming for a third ability, which, considering how unique it is really quite a shame. Which brings us to Hydroid's ultimate ability. By channeling his inner Japanese, Hydroid releases 12 flopping, flailing tentacles at wherever he's aiming. These tentacles will grab any enemies they manage to hit and slam them around, doing damage over time. Now, this is the first of his abilities that deals a sizable amount of damage. The tentacles will usually try to spawn directly under the enemies, and when this happens, they are dealt 300 magnetic damage, and the 300 damage is dealt again when the tentacles submerge. This damage increases with the square of power strength. Once captured, the tentacles deal finisher damage to the enemies, and maxed out on strength, it's possible to achieve an initial and final magnetic damage of around 3600 and a finisher damage per second of almost 700. The range the tentacles initially spawn in is quite large and can be made even larger with a few range mods. However, for larger open areas this is extremely ill-advised because the tentacles spawn all over the place and they'll sometimes barely hit anything. In confined areas, however, it becomes extremely effective and can lock down not one but sometimes multiple rooms at a time. Even so, it's still a little lacking in consistency. Sometimes enemies will just waltz through the tentacles to get a few shots at you. From the time I've spent playing him, I feel that Hydroid should be played as an aggressive caster frame, using his tidal surge to zip in and out of danger while controlling the enemy with his other 3 abilities. However, there are quite a few things preventing this, first and foremost of which are his stats. Hydroid sports average health and a very slightly higher shield capacity than most Warframes. He also has moderately higher sprint speed, which will tie into his aggressive playstyle. However, he has a rather low armor rating at just 65, another remnant of the old days of Warframe. So this makes his only way to survive the casting of multiple abilities to keep the enemies off his back. However, he has the lowest energy pool possible for any Warframe, at just 100 at base, which really does not help his abilities in any way. Now, although Hydroid has huge crowd control potential, this crowd control is not ideal. It has 2 major flaws which I will speak about presently. As I was going through Hydroid's abilities, you may have heard me use the words most of the time. Usually. Sometimes. This brings me to the major flaw with Hydroid's crowd control, which is inconsistency. While the glitches I've shown with Tidal Surge and Undertow might be just that, unintentional, rare glitches, Tempest Barrage and Tentacle Swarm are inconsistent by their very nature. The random way in which the artillery strike from Barrage occurs, the way the tentacles flap around almost unintentionally, makes them rather hit or miss. And for a Warframe that has little to no defenses, a miss is usually met with death. The next flaw with Hydroid's crowd control mainly refers to Hydroid's 3rd and 4th abilities, and unfortunately I can't put that prominently as a single word on the screen. But think of Vauban's Bastille, Excalibur's Blind, Equinox's Rest. All of these crowd control abilities will both incapacitate the enemy forces and allow us and our team to deal with them. Hydroid's Undertow makes whatever enemies he drowns completely inaccessible by us or our teammates, and the tentacles? You'll need some pretty nifty shots to kill anything slamming about in that. It's hard to see the word Hydroid without rework somewhere in very close proximity. And it pains me to say this, but I can understand why. See, despite liking Hydroid and all of his abilities, except Undertow perhaps, I understand how they don't measure up to the current state of Warframes present today. Over time, Warframes and their abilities have grown more and more complicated, and I can see why people clamour for a rework, because Hydroid remains in the simplicity of a Warframe long past. But does Hydroid truly need a revamp? No. In his case, simplicity is a refreshing change. I personally feel his abilities are fun and engaging, and they will be really improved with just a few minor tweaks. For example, just making the enemies in Undertow have their heads appear above water would be a great addition to squad play. Giving Tentacle Swarm and Tempest Barrage the ability to target enemies would make them so much more viable. What about giving the tentacles a threat level to make enemies target them? This would add just another small dimension of distraction and CC in his toolkit. All of these would be minor changes, and they would make the world of a difference. But who knows? As he's probably the next Warframe to be primed, I guess we'll see how the cookie crumbles very soon. Hydroid is not as terrible as his reputation. He can take you up to sortie levels given the appropriate amount of skill, and can bring a decent amount of control to a team. I would recommend Hydroid to any player, not because he's powerful or tanky or crazy good at CC, but for the simple fact that he's fun, which is why we all play Warframe. So to everyone who's not yet asleep or is angrily typing out their comments at how absolutely trash Hydroid is, thank you very much for watching this video. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it, a comment would be highly appreciated, and as always, thanks for watching and stay casual.